How did the Hanley family first get involved with the CBOT?
My family, we were like an old West Side Irish family. My grandmother on the Hanley side used to like to play the ponies. And there was a gentleman she met who used to walk by the apartment building on Ferdinand Street named Bill Griffin. And Bill Griffin had a firm at the Board of Trade called Griffin Grain. And this is going back to 1910, 1915 times. And he would be walking to the Lake Street elevated train to take it down to the Board of Trade. And so my grandmother used to like to play the ponies. And so she would give the bets to Bill, because there was always a lot of bookies, down at the exchange. And so when my dad, Tom Hanley, got to be 18, he was getting finished with Quigley, and she asked Bill if he had anything for her son down at the exchange. So my dad started in 1923 working as a runner at Griffin Grain. Then the Jewish guys from New York, from Beige, were trying to become clearing members at the Board of Trade, and they were having trouble getting in back then. And so they figured out a back door. So they bought the Irish grain firm, Griffin Grain, and that became Beige. And my dad tells the story that their office ended up just in an alley. I don't know if it was off of Monroe and LaSalle. There was a back door off the alley, and the orders would come in by, I think it was teletype from New York, and they would rip them off, out of the machine. And my dad was one of the runners, and he used to run down LaSalle Street and run up the stairs. It was the third floor then, because it was the building that was there before they built the Art Deco building, in 1928, 1929. And that was how, so my dad started at the Board of Trade in 1923. That's where maybe the word runner came from, because he used to have to run down LaSalle Street, him and the other runners up the stairs, up to the third floor and deliver the orders to the pit.
Did your father ever share stories from back in the day?
He shared a couple stories. I think it was Bill Cunningham's father. They used to have a big poker game up there on Fridays after the close. And there was one gentleman, God, I forget his name, but he came from the Royal Crown Cola family from Atlanta. And he was a true Southerner, big time speculator. He said one day, this Southern gentleman went and got a Confederate flag, and he went up. The observatory used to be at about the 5th floor over the old grain floor. And he took this Confederate flag and waved it over the trading floor and just said, "I'm going to get all you Yankees," and thought that was kind of a funny story. I grew up, how old are you when you can start remembering stuff? 4 years old, going down to the exchange. And I remember one time they literally had like the circus on the trading floor. And the exchange in a lot of ways was like a men's club. And, people would be smoking cigars in the pit. It was really a gentleman's club where a lot of, people watched out for each other. They really, really watched out for each other.
Did your dad become a member?
He became a member in the 1930s when he was working for Beige, because you had to have a full membership to be able to flash orders into the trading pits. So he was a phone man, but you had to have a full membership. And that's how they had all the desks were always tiered back then in the old grain floor there. So he got his first membership in the 30s, and then he went into the Marines for the Second World War. And then he got a deferment after being in for about 2 years because he was the oldest male. And he came out, and in 1945, he bought his own membership and became an independent broker. And he transferred his seat to my older brother, Tom Hanley, in 1980.
What pits did he trade in?
So he started in the rye pit and then went over to the wheat pit. And then he got Bache's top step deck with Bill Kentnick, top step soybean deck with Bill Kentnick in the late 50s. And then he started to get a lot of the commercial decks. And then there was a falling out, and they lost the deck. I remember that was hard times for the family in the late 60s. And then Al Smith had a bunch of the commercial paper, and he was at the third option of soybeans. The biggest volume was top step, the middle was second volume, and then the third was over in the corner, and with Herman Maggot, who was Shelley Gaffkin's father-in-law, Dave Brennan, and dad, and Al Smith. Al Smith was actually the mayor of Skokie for years. Irishman, went to Notre Dame. He was the mayor when the Nazis marched there in the 70s, I think that was. So Al was gracious enough to invite my dad over and become partners with him on this third step of beans, which my dad had that deck until about 1978. He gave up the deck.
When did you get involved in the exchange?
I grew up going down to the exchange and sitting in the big leather chairs, and you'd be walking on the grain from the bags of the cash grain, little samples that were over on the desks there along the north windows that looked down LaSalle Street, because the third option of beans was over there. And so that was my dad's spot. I kind of figured out that, okay, this is what I want to do. Okay, this is pretty cool, get out at 1:15, and it's you speculate, and it seems like, yeah, this is for me. So by 8th grade, I decided that I was going to be a trader, a great trader. Actually, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, but it seemed like a really good idea. And actually, it was incredibly empowering to me to go through high school and college and know where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. Now, when I got out of college, I went to University of Dayton. I came in, and I had really, really tried to have my dad put me at the CBOE, but he was a smart man. He knew his son. He put me at the Mid-America Exchange. And the Mid-America Exchange was 1,000 bushel instead of 5,000 bushel contracts. So it was 1/5 the risk. So I was sky high, coming out of school, and I proceeded to go broke 3 times, and I was devastated. One of the most humiliating periods in my life. But oh my God, did that teach me a lot of lessons? Did that teach me humility, how to appreciate things, how not to get ahead of yourself? And I got a job as a trade checker. Of course, they sent me to the Merck. I want to be at the Board of Trade. They sent me to the Merck. And that was interesting times at the Merck in the meets. I was trade checking. That was 1978, 1979. I wanted to go back to Dayton for homecoming. It's a big, fun weekend, a lot of parties. And so I told my workmate at Dean Witter that I was going to take Friday off and call in sick. And he proceeded to tell my boss. And when I came in on Monday, my boss called me and he said, I got to fire you just on principle, but you're pretty good at what you do. Will you stick around until you can stay and train your replacement? I stuck around and then went back to my dad and said, okay, what am I going to do, Dad? So he got me a job as a runner. So I went from trader to trade checker to runner. So I wasn't doing that great of a job becoming a great trader. And that was rough. That was a really rough time. So now I'm a runner for Heinhold Commodities at the Board of Trade. Brokers yelling at me. I don't know how to hand them an order. I mean, it was really, really rough. But it was what was on my path.
How did you go broke 3 times?
So the first time my dad opened an account for me at Green and Collins, I think I had $1,600 in my account. So when I bought beans, they went down. And then when I sold beans short, they went up almost like clockwork. Like there was some higher power that was in charge of that this was happening. My mom lent me $1,400 and I proceeded to lose that. Then my grandfather lent me $900 and I proceeded to lose that. And I was just being a speculator. My father came to me after I was a runner, going from trader to trade checker to runner after I went broke, and said, "Oh, I got to sell your mid-am seed." And I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about? How am I going to be a trader?" He's like, "Well, you got a college degree, go out and sell insurance or something." I was devastated. And my brother stepped up, Tom, and lent me $1,000. And he taught me a simple strategy. He taught me how to spread between 2 months of soybeans. And this was just a way more definitive, like real edge. And so I'm back at the mid-am. I remember the first half cent I made on one lot was $5, the best $5 I ever made in my life. And within 14 months, I was clearing my own trades. I was a clearing member of the mid-am. I was taking delivery of grain, going and picking up the receipts from Cargill, ADM, putting them in my safety deposit box across the street in the basement of Continental Bank. And I was the biggest volume trader at the Mid-America Exchange. That was 1980. So we were in the second floor of the insurance exchange building, right across the street from the Board of Trade. And it was really an interesting setup because you literally just watched a ticker tape, and then they had board markers that would write on the board in chalk, the last 3-4 prices, erase it, write it again. And we had meats, we had metals, we had grains. A lot of good traders came out of the mid-am back in those days. The lacrosse brothers were there. And, Steve Sullivan was somebody that went on to be Richard Dennis's broker in New York. And, Richard Dennis was there. Tommy Dennis was there. Bill Eckhart was there. They were all partners. One of my most favorite guys was John Moulton, who he ended up going to Australia. And he went to the Board of Trade, and then he went to Australia. I liked the guys that were pure speculators, because I was a spreader. So I was a lower risk. July Nove was sometimes not so low risk in soybeans, but I was a lower risk volume trader. My edge was defined. The guys that were pure speculators, I admired those guys.